Hello, this is Jennifer Parrish, Superintendent at Poquoson City Schools. I'd like to share with you my proposed budget for fiscal year 19. We had 3 budget priorities that we used in developing this budget. The first was to include additional full-time teaching positions in the budget because we need to support enrollment increase and more specifically an increase of students with disabilities. We also wanted to ensure that we included additional compensation for all of our employees and to move to the 3rd and final year of our new teacher pay plan as part of the transition process. What you will see as I move through this presentation that we were able to accomplish all 3 of those goals. I'd like now to talk to you about state funding. As you can see here, based on the 2017 JLARC study, our state ranked 38th in state per pupil funding and 29th in teacher salaries. This is all true while the per capita personal income ranks us 11th in the country. Also, as you see here, the percentage of public K-12 education share of the state general fund dropped from 35% in fiscal year 09 to 29% in fiscal year 2018. So what this means is that while we received cuts as a result of the Great Depression, we also saw our piece of the pie in terms of the general fund grow smaller. We are not seeing that increase at this time. And third, and a very important point, is the fact that all state school construction funds, which also supported school facility maintenance, were eliminated from the state budget in the start of the recession. What this means is that we receive no state funding to do any work on our buildings or to even just simply maintain them. All the funding for that has to come from our locality. And that's a very important point as we're having discussions in the city about a major renovation to the middle school as well as roof repairs to 2 other of our schools. Let's look back on a little history about our school division's budget. Since the start of the recession, we've made approximately $5 million worth of programmatic and personnel reductions. We had to do this to offset the loss of state revenue, also because of the increase in VRS rates, as well as other cost increases that we've experienced during that time period. As part of those reductions, we reduced a number of categorical funding areas. These included professional development, materials and supplies, textbooks, and equipment. During the course of the last 9 years, we've cut approximately $166,000 across all of those categories. I'm going to address this topic when I get further into my presentation. Another very important note that we need to pay attention to is the fact that we eliminated 56 positions during the course of the last 9 years. 12 of those teaching positions went beyond the enrollment loss. So in other words, today, if we had not had all of the revenue reductions that we experienced, we would have 12 teaching positions that do not exist in our current budget now. Also, I just want to also highlight the fact that the City of Poquoson has provided our school division approximately $1.59 million in additional funding during the course of the last 9 years. This funding helped us to provide some compensation increases when possible and ensured that we didn't have to make more programmatic or personnel reductions. We continue to appreciate the fact that our city was of such great support during the course of the recession and know that it was not possible for them to offset all of the loss of state funding. Let's talk a little bit about enrollment projections. From 2006 through 2016, the school division lost 522 students. During the course of last year, we actually were able to gain students. So we had an additional 59 students enrolled in our school. This includes preschool for this school year. Based on the projections of the Weldon Cooper Center, which is the organization that does research and demographics for the state, and on the early kindergarten registration that we did in February, we are projecting for this budget that we will see an increase of another 36 students. Know that currently, with the information from Weldon Cooper Center, we're predicting an increase in students over the course of the next 10 years. And in fact, 10 years from now, we may have almost as many students as we had in 2006, which was the highest point of enrollment for our school division. Let's look a little bit about what we see coming in terms of state funding for us. But before we do that, I have to make sure that you understand that the budget that I am proposing is based on former Governor McAuliffe's budget that was introduced in December. As you may know, the General Assembly closed its session this year without having a budget approved. They will come back on April 11th into a special session. Both the House and the Senate budget had a little bit more funding for us than Governor McAuliffe's budget did, but we decided the best course of action was to base our budget on the worst case scenario. So it may be that we see some additional funding coming to our budget once the General Assembly and current governor are done with their work. So based on the budget information that we have, we would be receiving over $443,000 for our enrollment increase. As you can see, this is why having enrollment increases can be so helpful to us. We also will see an increase in SOQ funding related to rebenchmarking of over $160,000. Rebenchmarking occurs every 2 years. It is important to note, though, that the rebenchmarking that was done was based on the funding that we received after the recession. So in reality, the true cost of education is much closer to the pre-recession funding, but the rebenchmarking is not based on those funds. You see here a decrease in retirement funding coming to us from the state. This is because the VRS rates for the coming year were decreased, which was good news to us. So while we're losing some state funding, you'll see in the next slide that we're going to gain some funding because of the change in the rates. You see a little over $17,000 for an increase in supplemental lottery per pupil funding. So our net projected state funding increase is over $608,000. We have not seen an increase like this in state funding in many, many years. Now let's look at our cost increases, or in the case of this year, our decreases. On the first line, you see health and dental insurance. It shows as a decrease of over $135,000. This has made a real difference for us this year with the budget. We put a request for a proposal out so that we look to see if we changed our health plans, if we could save some additional money. I'm going to talk to you in detail about the health insurance decision later in this presentation, but I wanted you to know that we did see a decrease in cost as a result of the fact that we went out to bid. Here is where you see we do not have to pay as much into VRS as a result of the reduction of the VRS rates. So the next two line items, $74,500 and $3,500, show as a decrease in cost to us. As you can see, that offsets the loss of funding that we received from the state in the prior slide. We have a fairly high cost increase for the New Horizons Regional Center. This is because of an increase in enrollment, and specifically we do see some increase in enrollment in special education there. Also, as is always the case, we always have some sort of increases in our contracts or utilities, so you see that's over $38,000. So what you actually see here is that we're decreasing our costs by over $76,000. You see that because we have such a big decrease in our health and dental insurance as well as a decrease in VRS rates. So again, this is not something you've seen in years in terms of our school division budget. So this shows a summary of our projected cost decrease of $76,152, as well as our net projected state funding increase of over $608,000. So we have a projected budget increase of $684,340. Let's talk about how we're going to utilize this budget increase. Here are recommended budget actions. Everything that you see down here would be an addition to our budget. So first, in the area of personnel, we're requesting 3 teacher FTEs. Remember, in an earlier slide, I talked about the fact that we cut 12 teachers' positions beyond enrollment as part of the recession. We're now seeing an increase in enrollment, so we now need to catch up in terms of our teaching positions. Certainly, we're not going to do all of that in 1 year, but this item here, by adding 3 teachers, will help us move forward. Know that this is a direct result of the increase in enrollment that we're experiencing, and that we experienced this year and into next year. Also, you see here an increase in textbooks for $15,000, materials and supplies for $5,000, professional development for $5,000, and curriculum writing for $5,000. I also mentioned in an earlier slide the fact that we had done this categorical reduction throughout the recession, and it totaled about $166,000. What you see here is a proposal that we bring about $30,000 of that back into the budget. So we still have a long way to go, but at least we can begin to produce a stronger funding in on these categorical areas that will support our work, especially as we see our increase in enrollment. You also see the $8,000 here for security equipment. Through state grants over the last several years, we've increased the number of cameras we have in all of our schools. As a matter of fact, we spent approximately $250,000 in grant funding to do so. What we need to do now is cover the cost of the licensing for that security equipment, and that's why you see this line item here. This means our total budget additions are over $246,000. Let's talk next about our compensation increase. Here is what you see as our proposal in this budget for a compensation increase. What we would be able to do here is move through the final year of the transition to our new teacher pay plan. So we will in 3 years have gone to a full transition. As we do this, our teachers move up a step, and then we will apply a 2% compensation increase to the teacher pay. So this means teachers will receive a step plus a 2% increase. All other employees will receive a 2% compensation increase. Substitute teachers and substitute nurses' daily rates would increase by $5, so they would make $80 a day. This puts us in line with our surrounding school divisions who we are competing with for substitute teachers and nurses. We're also increasing our long-term substitute daily rate by $12 to $95 a day in an attempt to be more competitive with surrounding localities. So the total cost of compensation included in this budget proposal is over $485,000. Here you see what the new teacher pay plan would look like for next year. You see the step, then you see the scale or the actual salary, and then you see what a teacher's increase would be for next year depending on which step they're on. So for example, a teacher who is currently on step 1 would move to step 2. So that teacher would make $42,324, and they would see an increase in salary of 3.7%. Part of that comes from the actual step increase of 1.22%. Part of that also comes from the increase that we're applying to the scale of 2%, and also there's some additional funding because of the transition that we're making. So you can see here for the FY19% increase, the actual increases vary depending on where on the step plan a teacher is, but you will notice that they're actually all over 2%. The only teachers who will receive solely a 2% increase are those that are off the scale. In other words, they're past step 30. What you see here is the average increase on that scale for our teachers, and that's 3.51%, and you see the average increase amount in actual dollars that would mean for them. The lowest increase, as I mentioned, is 2%, and those are teachers that are beyond step 30 with us. And then the highest increase is 7.10%, and you see the average increase amount there for a teacher. That amount is for the teacher who's moving on to the final step, or step 30, because we do provide the biggest boost then as our teachers begin to prepare or think about retirement. Let's talk briefly about health insurance. As you would expect, health insurance continues to be a considerable cost for our school division. The division has absorbed all of the increased cost of health care from fiscal year 09 through fiscal year 17. Moving into the current school year, we did make some changes to the plan, and because of the new tiers that we created, there were some increases to premiums. This year, as I mentioned earlier, our school division issued an RFP for health and dental insurance. We received 3 medical proposals and 10 dental proposals. Those proposals will take into our benefits committee, which is made up of 3 teachers or staff from each school, and all of them are enrolled in our health insurance plan. At the request of the benefits committee, the school division issued a division-wide survey so we could get insight into employee comfort with regard to a possible change in health insurance. When beginning the work, both Anthem and Optima were considered to be viable options for health insurance. Please note that currently our employees are on Anthem. This budget proposal incorporates the Anthem health and dental plans. When we surveyed our staff, the data revealed that 92% of employees who have health insurance were very comfortable or comfortable remaining with Anthem. That, as you can see, means the vast majority of our staff were interested in staying on our current plan. The survey data revealed that 51% of employees with health insurance felt that maintaining the current health insurance plan was more important than increased compensation. Know that employees who were not accessing our health or dental plan felt by a larger margin that compensation or an increase in it was more important, but it should be noted that some of those folks did also say that current health insurance plan was more important. So based on the data we received, we decided to remain with Anthem. Now, Optimum would have provided greater savings for us, but what we determined was that even with the Optima savings, it was not enough to give a meaningful increase in compensation. If we wanted to do that, if we moved to Optima, we would also have to eliminate a new teacher FTE to get to an additional 1% compensation increase, because the Optima savings would not even give us a 0.5% increase in compensation. So as you can see, with all that information, we will remain with Anthem Health. We are changing the dental plan to Anthem Dental because with those two combined, we did see a very good savings, as you saw in an earlier slide. So here's our budget summary. Our state funding increase you see here, the net cost decrease, and the personnel savings. I didn't speak specifically to personnel savings, but know that whenever we have teachers or other staff members retire, we typically see some savings because they're usually at the top end of the pay scale, and our hires are usually not at that point in the pay scale. So looking at retirements, we're anticipating savings over $48,000. You also see here the cost of compensation, which we've discussed, as well as those personnel and categorical funds that we are trying to replenish in the school division as a result of our increase in enrollment. So what you see for the first time in the last 10 years is a total budget shortfall of 0. This means that we are able to send a level funded budget, or rather not ask for additional funding from the city as we move into the next phase of the budget process. Just a reminder about our budget process. On March 27th, we will have a public hearing on my proposed budget, and it is quite possible that at that meeting the school board will vote on that budget so that it can be forwarded to City Council on March 30th. If the school board decides they need some more changes to the budget, then an additional school board meeting would occur on March 29th, and they would vote on the budget that day if needed. Just a reminder here that the General Assembly special session for the budget begins on April 11th. So the budget that we send over to the city is not the budget that we will end up with at the end of the year, because we know the General Assembly will make some changes to the former governor's budget. Hopefully this will be done before the school year ends so that we will know exactly the funding we will have for next year. Again, just a reminder that the state is not fully reinvested in K-12 education since the recession, and we still face unfunded mandates. This is the first year, as I mentioned earlier, since fiscal year 10 that the school division has not requested additional local funding. Do know if we receive any additional funding, it would likely go to support additional compensation for all employees. We know from the state budget there is a potential that we could see some additional funding because that was true in both the initial draft of the Senate and House budgets. And finally, it's important to note that our city officials continue to work with financial advisors to determine the best course of action to secure debt for the Poquoson Middle School renovation and other CIP projects, which include the primary and high school roof replacements. This is why it is such a good year for us not to need the additional local funding, because we know that city officials are looking and working to have funding for these major CIP projects in the immediate future. This concludes the presentation about my budget proposal for fiscal year 19. As always the case, if you have any questions or concerns, do not hesitate to email, call, or if you see me at a school event, to come and talk to me about them. I appreciate the continued support that we receive from the Poquoson community each year as we go through our budget development process.